discovering Wes Moore. So real quick, just taking a look at the cover, you might have a different version, but noticing here it says one name, this says two fates, this orange jumpsuit here, this white suit here. I wonder what that means for the story, if it is important or not, the why things are upside down here, why things are right side up here, just depending which version you got. On the back, let's read this together. Wes Moore is a Rhodes Scholar, an Army veteran, and the author of this book. But early in his life, things took a turn when his father died suddenly and he and his family moved to a new neighborhood. That was when Wes started to skip school and run into trouble with the police. It took his mother sending him to a military academy for him to get his life on track. Years later, he read a newspaper article about a man who shared his name. The other Wes Moore. This Wes Moore also grew up fatherless in a nearby Baltimore neighborhood, only no one had ever intervened on his behalf, and now he was serving a life sentence for murder. Okay, let's open it up. Inside cover here. Picture there. Again, yours might be a little bit different, but all the pages are the same, thankfully. And we're going to first read the note from the author. Here we go. Writing this book has not been easy. It has forced me to accept a lot about my past that was not easy to accept, and to share a lot of my past I had no intention to. I am not proud of many of the mistakes I've made, some of which you will read about in this book. But I have a feeling I am not alone. I am excited about sharing this journey with you in the hope that you will see similarities between your experiences and mine. More importantly, though, I hope that you will see similarities between yourself and those around you. It's amazing how thin that line can sometimes be between our life and someone else's. Growing up, I often felt as though I was on my own. I thought my decisions didn't have consequences, and my opinions didn't matter to anyone but me. I was taught the difference between right and wrong, but I didn't fully understand it. Becoming an adult seemed like a constant struggle. Page 2. Do I do what I want, or do I do what I'm told? Do I do what I know is right, or do what all my friends are doing? Maybe, like me, you have been pressured by people you consider your friends to do things that got you in trouble. Maybe, in an attempt to be surrounded by others, you found yourself more alone than ever. It's a painful place to be, I get it. Fortunately, I came to understand that not only was I not alone, but I didn't have to be in that place forever. When my first book, The Other Wes Moore, came out, people from all over the country and even the world picked it up and told me they liked it because they related to the stories. I was very happy about that. But I also knew that I wanted to do something for young adults, the young men and women who sit where I sat not long ago. I wanted to speak to the young people who are wrestling with the same fears, who are experiencing the same first love, who are trying to figure out in their own time and their own terms what their journey to adulthood will look like. I particularly wanted to help that young adult who was on the brink of an important decision. One step can determine what a person's tomorrow will look like. I wanted to help make sure that one step was the right one. I didn't fully understand until I was older how our choices can shape the rest of our lives. When I finally woke up to the truth, it was almost too late. In these pages, you will hear about my path and about that of another man also named Wes Moore, with whom I've become close. A man who, like me, longed to learn what was right and to achieve a sense of belonging. A sense of, how about page 3, acceptance. At times he succeeded, at times he fell woefully short. But at every juncture, he kept searching. You will read not only about the choices Wes and I made, but also about the people in our lives who helped us make those choices. Even when we didn't realize it, we were never alone. There were family, friends, coaches, teachers, and neighborhood role models who helped shape us, guide us, and protect us. And that was the key. Yet even though these people could act as advisors, ultimately Wes and I had to decide whether to listen, to work, to fight, and to forgive. I ended up receiving a prestigious scholarship to graduate school, serving in the Army as an officer, and becoming a best-selling author. The other Wes Moore ended up being arrested and tried for felony murder. Around the time I was heading to England as a Rhodes Scholarship, the other Wes Moore was preparing to serve his prison sentence of life with no parole. You can get that much by reading the book flap or doing a simple internet search, but that's not where the story starts or ends. The chilling truth is that his story could have been mine, and the tragedy is that my story could have been his. We all have stories to tell, important ones that need to be acknowledged, respected, and understood. Each story is a piece of the mosaic that makes a community. Each community is in turn a part of our nation and our world. And as members of a community, we must remember that it is our responsibility to help people who might not have the support we have. Page 4. This book is not meant to congratulate or to cast judgment, nor is it meant to elicit sympathy. I simply want people to realize that they can find not just inspiration, but understanding in the most unexpected places. I want people to know that one choice can lead to another life altogether. And finally, I want to show them that I wasn't as alone as I thought I was, and that maybe they're not alone either. All right, let's begin chapter 1. It's entitled For Keeps. Nikki and I were chasing each other around the living room. Every time she caught me, I'd scream, but I loved every second. I was 3. For every step her 9-year-old legs took, my little legs had to take 4. It wasn't easy to catch up. Then, for the first time ever, I caught her in my grasp. But I had no idea what to do. So, in the spirit of 3-year-old boys everywhere who run out of better ideas, I punched her, laughing hysterically. My mother had a radar for mischief. She walked into the room right as my swing connected with Nikki's arm. "Get up to your dang room!" Her yell startled me. "I told you, don't you ever put your hands on a woman!" My mother has hands that hit so hard, you only have to feel them across your face once to know you don't want them striking there again. I darted up the stairs to my room before those hands could reach me. If I hid myself, maybe, on page 6, I wouldn't get punished. I slammed the door shut behind me just as her voice reached the second floor. "And don't let me hear you slam that!" Boom! I stared at the closed door, knowing it would soon be flying open again. I sat there in silence in the middle of the tiny room I share with my baby sister, Shawnee. I wasn't even sure why I was in so much trouble. "Joy, you can't get on him like that." My father's baritone voice drifted up through the thin floor. "He's only 3. He won't even understand what he did wrong. You really think he knows what a woman beater is?" It wasn't his style to yell. He stood 6'2". He was thin, with a bushy mustache and a neatly trimmed afro. "Wes, he needs to learn what is good behavior and what is not," my mom responded. I heard my father's gentle laugh. Cursing at him isn't the most effective way of making that point. My parents' words faded into the background as I stared out the window, which overlooked a street in our busy neighborhood. On the dresser by the window sat a framed picture of Nikki and me. Colorful beads capped her braids, a hairdo she shared with my mother, and large black framed eyeglasses covered half of her face. I sat on her lap with my arm wrapped around her neck, a goofy smile on my face. My full name is Wesley Watende Omari Moore. My first name, Wesley, is my father's. As for my middle names, my father loved the sound and meaning of Watende, a Shona word that means revenge will not be sought. It fit with, page 7, his gentle, forgiving spirit. My mother thought Watende sounded too big and complicated for a tiny baby. She wanted to call me Omari, which means the highest. I'm not sure what was less complicated or soaring about that name, but they compromised by giving me both. Nikki's real name is Joy, like my mom's, but at a young age, she was nicknamed after Nikki Giovanni, my mom's favorite poet. Mom was inspired by Nikki Giovanni's feminine strength, and she wanted to teach my sisters and me about Giovanni's message of tender love and fierce revolution. I spent nearly every waking moment near Nikki, following her around as we teased each other. I couldn't understand what boundary I had broken in our game. This wasn't really a woman I was punching anyway. This was Nikki. She was a comrade. Our bond was so close, it was like we were one being. I thought there was no risk of offending her. Years would pass before I understood how that blow connected to my mom's past. My mother, Joy, came to the United States at the age of 3. She was born in Low River in the farmlands of Jamaica. Quiet Low River was far away from the tourist attractions along the coast. My mother's grandparents, my great-grandparents, were called Maz Fred and Ms. Ross. They lived on land that had belonged to our ancestors for generations. But my grandfather dreamed of studying, page 8, theology at a university in America. When the family finally earned enough money, they moved to New York. Settling into the Bronx took effort for Joy, but she jumped into the melting pot with both feet. She studied the kids at school like an anthropologist, quietly observing their accents and their style. She imitated voices she heard on the radio, tailoring her speech to fit her surroundings. The Jamaican word "irie" became cool. Constable became policeman. Easy now became chill out. The melodic fluidity of the Jamaican accent gave way to the crisper diction of American English. Joy entered American University, AU, in Washington, D.C. in 1968. It was a year marked by change, excitement, and tragedy throughout the world. In America, people were protesting the Vietnam War and marching in the Civil Rights Movement in the name of peace and desegregation. The nation was divided. When Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, American cities exploded in riots. The riots were about more than King's murder, though. They were about years of racial segregation and economic inequality that were reaching a breaking point. Being quiet was no longer an option. People took to the streets to express their rage. They were so overcome by feelings of frustration and hurt that they were burning down their own neighborhoods in many areas. People in white neighborhoods blockaded their streets, trying to keep the damage within the poorer black areas. By the time the riots stopped, our nation's inner cities stood eerily quiet. To this day, there are parts of our country that have not fully recovered. Page 9. Joy was furious that America, the very country that offered her new opportunities, still had laws and traditions that allowed her, as an African American and a woman, to be treated like a second-class citizen. She found support with her friends and fellow students in a campus group called OASATAU, the Organization of African and African American Students at the American University. OASATU encouraged AU's Black students to take an active interest in national, international, and campus issues. Being around students with similar ideas raised my mother's awareness and her standards. She didn't want to change to fit into the melting pot. She wanted to be accepted for who she was. The treasurer of OASATAU, was a junior named Bill. 2 months after he and my mom met, they were engaged. 2 years later, they married. Bill looked for work while Joy was a junior in college. They were both still trying to find their feet as adults, though, and being responsible for each other overwhelmed them. The love haze wore off sooner than they had expected. The same qualities that had made Bill so attractive as a college boyfriend, his free and rebellious spirit, his fierce contempt for the man, made him completely unreliable as a husband. He had long been an occasional drug user, but now he started using drugs daily. Joy knew that free love and drug experimentation were part of being young in the 1970s, but she didn't like them being constants in her own home. As years passed, Joy kept hoping that Bill's use of alcohol and drugs would stop. She believed that her fantasy, top page 10, could come true, that she could change and save her man. When Nikki was born, Joy expected that Bill would be motivated to cope with his addictions and step up as a dad. But instead, his addictions got worse, and the physical and emotional abuse he inflicted on Joy intensified dramatically. One night, Bill came home higher than Joy had ever seen him. "Wash the dishes!" he shouted. He was knocking doors and cabinets shut, slamming glasses down on the table. "Shh," she pleaded. "You'll wake Nikki." The more she shushed him, the more he hollered. He moved in on her so that the two of them stood face to face. He grabbed her shoulders, threw her down. She was sprawled on the floor in her blue American University sweatpants in agony. Before she could get up, he grabbed her t-shirt and hair and dragged her toward the kitchen. She screamed without fear of waking Nikki anymore. He hit her in the chest and stomach. She kicked and scratched at his hands. He dragged her more roughly across the floor until her head slammed into a door jamb. He released his grip on her hair, and once again he bellowed, "Wash the dishes!" He stood over her with a contemptuous scowl on his face. That look was the last straw. His abuse and humiliation were ruining the happy life Joy wanted for her daughter. Her will gave her the strength to pull herself up from the floor. On top of the counter was a wooden block that held a large, sharp knife in the kitchen. She pulled the biggest one out and angled the blade at his throat. Her voice was collected. "If you try that again, it will be the last thing you ever do." Bill seemed to suddenly become sober. He backed out of the kitchen slowly, not taking his eyes from his wife's tear-stained face, her determined stare. A month later, Joy and Nikki left Bill for good. Mom vowed to never let another man put his hands on her. We're stopping today at page 11. Continue on with our final question. Feel free to leave me some feedback on this first trial at reading a book together. Let me know what else you'd like to do. All right, folks, good luck. All right, folks, summarize what we just read. Somebody wanted, but so then write it in your Ed puzzle. Good luck.